In August 2017, Ninja Theory wowed audiences with their latest IP called Senua's Sacrifice. What made this game so incredible and helped win over audiences was the use of incredible sound design that added new mechanics to a game. It highlighted psychosis, mental health, and through the use of binaural audio and motion capture made for quite a horrifying but immersive experience with a really great story that explored Norse mythology and the idea of loss. The game was super unique, it played with new mechanics, and it was unlike many other games on the market with a neat spin on telling a story. The game got rave reviews from most publications, and it did so well that Microsoft themselves bought the studio and announced their partnership at E3 2019. But with this purchase, Ninja Theory went on to announce their latest IP, which was Bleeding Edge, a 4v4 hero battle arena. Since that reveal, hype for the game was pretty low, and on its release in what could only be described as the worst possible timing, coming out 4 days after the release of Doom Eternal and Animal Crossing New Horizons, two highly anticipated games that both had huge followings, Bleeding Edge also failed to lift off the ground, with the only piece of marketing being occasionally on Twitter and on the Xbox and Microsoft storefront. Bleeding Edge went straight onto Xbox's brilliant Game Pass and was constantly on the front of the store every time you opened it on Xbox and the Microsoft Store. But within the same week of its launch after Doom Eternal and Animal Crossing, Bleeding Edge went on to see one of the worst turnouts in player count, reaching a maximum of 600 odd players on the third day of its release. It also had a terrible Twitch viewer count, barely reaching 1,000 viewers. Quite honestly, it's safe to say that Bleeding Edge was not the best title and probably not what Ninja Theory or Microsoft was hoping for. But why was it such a failure? Was it simply because of its release window with Doom Eternal and Animal Crossing? Or was it because it was a style of game that was part of a heavily crowded market, especially with Riot's Valorant beta coming out as well? Well, with my Game Pass subscription, I loaded up Bleeding Edge, played it for myself, and also got my friend the Mighty Jambu to play it, and safe to say, whilst the launch day was bad planning and it's part of an incredibly crowded genre, there are just so many other problems with Bleeding Edge that make it extremely unenjoyable to play. So in this video, I want to highlight why I really did not enjoy my experience playing Ninja Theory's latest title, Bleeding Edge, and why I think this was a bad decision for Xbox and the recently bought studio. So welcome to WiseFish, and this is why I dislike Bleeding Edge. Before I talk about the big problems I have with this game, I first want to acknowledge what this game does right, but quite honestly, that list is pretty short. Let's start with the opening cinematic. It's really cool, it's fast paced, it has an awesome music track to it, the voice acting is great, and the whole animation is brilliantly pieced together. It actually got me really hyped for the game itself. Alongside that, whilst I was skeptical about its graphics and its art style, I've got to admit I do like the way this game looks. The heroes do have some cool designs, although I will get onto them later on, but there is a nice combination of Borderlands art style matched with something like Sunset Overdrive. The game is filled with colour and it does look pretty good, especially on ultra graphics on PC. The game also runs really smoothly. In my time playing it, I didn't experience any bugs, so I never saw frame drops, and I never really felt like the game had a poor performance overall. But with that's where it ends for me, sadly. That was all the good things I could take out from my time playing the game. It really pains me to say that because I had high hopes for Ninja Theory, but quite honestly, the game just isn't fun for me or my friend. A lot of people will say this game resembles Overwatch, Paladins, or even Battleborn. Quite honestly, Bleeding Edge feels better compared with a great little hero battle arena game that came out back in 2014 titled Gigantic. Gigantic was a great game that had some pretty cool and unique characters with some pretty awesome mechanics. It also had an art style that fit the setting, and its gameplay just felt really fluid. It was a cross between a MOBA and a hack and slash arena that relied on player skill to hit combos to take out the opposing team's Guardian. Gigantic, sadly, because of its underwhelming popularity, closed its servers back in 2018. Unsurprisingly though, Gigantic was bought by Microsoft back in 2016 and was made exclusive to Xbox and Windows 10. Whilst it isn't 100% confirmed, this exclusive deal seemed to really have hurt the game's popularity and led to the game's downfall, especially due to the fact that Microsoft really did not advertise or market this game at all. For me, Bleeding Edge seems to be following suit, and it feels like it is Microsoft's way of clawing back at a game genre that they lost with Gigantic and try to repair the damage caused by this game series. But honestly, I wish Microsoft had the foresight to realise that they had already had a better version of this type of game back in 2016. But why is Bleeding Edge so bad? I'll start with the gameplay itself, because quite honestly for me, this was the most underwhelming part of my whole experience. The combat just feels so sluggish all the time. When we look at the trailer for the game, it's incredibly fast paced, it's got abilities flying all the time, the music is full on, and it looks like a great fun hack and slash multiplayer game. When you get into the actual game itself, it feels like it can't decide whether it wants to be a tactical MOBA or indeed a hack and slash. The gameplay is incredibly slow paced, which is completely the opposite from all the marketing and the previews of it that we got. One of my biggest problems when I was playing this game was that I never really felt like I was in full control of my character. The camera is placed in such an awkward low down angle, placing the character in the left third and being at the same height as their waist, which just didn't feel right in the slightest. The camera for me would have been much better if it was raised up higher so that I could see beyond my character and have them more centered and not so distant from it. It's also super floaty and is not attached to the direction your character is facing, meaning you can attack things that are off screen, which can happen due to the lock-on system and leads to some confusing fights. If Bleeding Edge had the same locked-on camera that can be adjusted like in Gigantic or even Smite, then for me the combat would have felt a bit smoother. But with this wandering camera that is at a really awkward angle, it makes battles really horrible to experience, at least for me and my friend Jambo. That brings me on to the attacks. They are just so sluggish once again. Bleeding Edge tries to implement more of a lockdown on your attacks, meaning once you commit to one you are stuck in an animation and unable to move until it completes. And if an enemy dodges out of the way, they suddenly have the upper hand as you have to finish your attack before you can go into the next. It's like they have tried to implement For Honor and Monster Hunter World combat mechanics into the game, but for something that is meant to be a fast-paced arena hack and slash style, I just don't think losing control of your character in this way was the right thing for this game. It slows combat down, and if you do actually get a hit on an enemy, it just doesn't actually feel as satisfying as it does in Monster Hunter World or For Honor, for example. Let's also talk about the auto-aim lock mechanic that this game has. This for me takes away all player skill, and again takes away all real control of your character, which was seen by me and Jambo as probably one of the biggest reasons we really dislike this game. It's also super hit and miss with abilities. I played a lot with this snake healer guy who has a ranged attack which utilizes auto-aim and a healing ability which drops a ground healing ability that then locks onto your nearest companion, or if no one is around, yourself. These abilities though just don't seem to know who they actually want to focus on. There were so many times in the game where I wanted to heal my allies directly in front of me who had been in the battle for a while and their health was getting low. Yet when I activated my shield ability, which grants them extra health, a lot of the time the game would just default the ability to me, meaning that I, who already had full health, would get a shield for no reason, while my allies would get no healing help whatsoever. It became so frustrating, and on top of that the ground ability aiming is awful. The game completely takes away all movement input from your character, and on your mouse on PC and your right thumbstick on your controller starts controlling the aiming circle on the ground. You cannot turn at all, and this circle can go off your screen. It is the most bizarre and awkward thing to use. The game has these systems to ultimately try to help the player with character control, but in our experience it just made it more fiddly. Also on top of that, I must quickly mention that the key bindings for PC are appalling. The default ping to let your team know that your ultimate is charging is by default literally set to left, alt and P. If you look down at your keyboard, you'll notice that there is literally no way you can activate that without using both hands unless you have huge hands, and even then you would have to still take your fingers off the WASD keys. The key mapping once again just doesn't make any sense and proves that this game was just intended for the controller. I mean, to be fair, it does say that it's best played with a controller, but if it's coming to PC, you'd think that they would put a little thought into the keyboard and mouse controls, even if the controls just weren't as good. This is clear that they were an afterthought, or not even thought about at all in this case. Even then, the controller is awkward. Having the right trigger to boost and X to attack just felt so unnatural, and I'm pretty sure I didn't see any way of changing this. It's like if they brought Halo to PC but decided that it was only going to be used with a controller. It makes no sense at all and defeats the point. Actually, to be honest, Halo's key bindings are awful as well. Just sort it out, Microsoft. These key bindings make no sense and they're just so unnatural. One really irritating thing I found was that the ranged weapons would not tell you if you are out of range until after you initiated fire. It doesn't affect anything really, it's just super annoying to think that you've initiated a battle to find out that your attacks are too far away. I just thought it was personally really irritating and wondered why there was even a range with this game considering the maps aren't even that big. I played a lot of games in Bleeding Edge and mainly used this guy here, who is probably my favourite out of all the characters. I got MVP in one match, getting top kills and assists and 0 deaths, and at the end I just wasn't that satisfied with the game that I just played. That's one of my biggest problems. Everything I experienced in the game, I just didn't really enjoy that much. It was just basically, that was alright I guess, whilst I reluctantly queued for another match. I think one thing that really pushed me out of the immersion of the game modes was the music. Now whilst it's actually quite chill and not a bad soundtrack, it does not fit with the game in the slightest. In Overwatch, when you get to the end of a match, the music builds and it feels like this tense panic to either fight back the enemy team who are winning or pushing forward to get that final victory screen. In Gigantic, the winning team who is close to victory has their Guardian help them attack the enemies in the final siege. The map also changes and then you know victory or loss is within sight. In Bleeding Edge, apart from the timer at the top, there is no real audio or visual cue to show that victory or loss is imminent. The music remains the same background chilled house that it was at the start, and when you get that victory screen at the end, you sort of think to yourself, oh, did we win? Is it over? It's not satisfying and it bothered me more than it should, the fact that there was no real pride in having a victory. Winning matches honestly doesn't mean anything to me at all. The characters themselves, whilst having some pretty cool designs, really weren't anything special either. None of them had abilities that made me want to play them, some of the ultimates are absolutely useless, and yet none of them really stood out as iconic characters that sells the game franchise. They also are crystal clear rip-offs of Overwatch and other multiplayer hero-based games. This healer here, for example, who is called Zero Cool, is a carbon copy of Lucia. He is a DJ who listens to music and heals people. There's no subtlety to it, it's just so blatant. This character, who is the main one of the game, is a clear Genji ripoff with his masked face and ninja swords. Even his run animation is the same. Oh, and he is ninja Sart, so, you know, he's basically Genji. The character I like the most is a blatant rip-off of Paladins, which is a laugh in itself, as Paladins is accused of ripping off Overwatch. And then there's this character who is called Gizmo, who is a young teenage girl who wears a helmet, has quirky badges, and also summons a mech. She is basically the Mechromancer or Moze from Borderlands. There's also the abilities which are ripped out of other games. Buttercup here, who is a tank, has a pull-in ability which is almost exactly like Roadhog's, and then Makuta here has an ability that lets him swap auras. One mode of it heals the team around him through a pulse, and you can switch that to a speed boost which affects the team around him as well. Oh, and also he has another ability that boosts those previous two effects. You see where I'm going with this? Yeah, it's basically Lucio once again. The clear ripping off of other characters makes me so disappointed, as it shows that there was a real lack of any originality to the game's design. One of the biggest defenses of this game was that it was in development around the time of Overwatch or just after, but like with other games that failed in this genre like Lawbreakers, seeing the design of the game, the heroes and the abilities, I fail to truly believe that. And if anyone says that Overwatch stole from Bleeding Edge, then I massively do not believe that at all, as there is no way that Bleeding Edge is a game that had these developed characters in the making for over 5 years. On top of me really disliking these characters, there were also a few additional things that added to my dislike. One thing was every character bar a few have mounts that they ride into battle, like you get in Paladins. The mount system is something else the game does wrong. In lieu of sprinting when out of combat, you can mount up to move faster. Sounds alright at first, but this game is meant to be fast paced. Not only do you have to stand still for a few seconds in order to mount up, but the character's base movement speed has to be slower in order for the mounts to feel like they make a meaningful difference. And as we have discussed before, this game already feels slower than it should be, and has me thinking that the mounts exist in the game solely for the purpose of selling mount skins to players, which is fine normally, but not when it negatively affects the game on such a fundamental level. There's also the fact that these hoverboards aren't unique to your character. Every hoverboard is the same no matter what character you play as. If this was a core mechanic they wanted to use, then why couldn't characters have their own unique boards that fit their characters? Why can't the undead looking guy have one made out of a dead guitar, for example? Why is there no unique look to them? You can change their designs through cosmetics which are either bought or earned through credits, but again, it's just generic boards which can be used by all the characters apart from Zero Cool and Buttercup, who sadly don't get their own mounts as they are technically always on one. Which now brings me on to customizations. This game, which you know follows the same design as any other multiplayer games like Battleborn or Overwatch etc., has a setup for a game that would be big on customizing your favourite character with new skins, animations, victory poses, etc. There's room for that kind of thing, and that is what appeals to people when you play hero-based games. In Bleeding Edge, heroes have 2 unlockable skins. 2. They're not even that good either. They are literally a change in colour like the really basic ones you get in Overwatch. There's no change in a character's design, there are no exotic skins. You literally have a choice of 3 basic looking skins that do not make you feel a sense of pride in your character once again. There are unlockable mods which help boost certain attacks or movement speed on a character and allow you to actually play around with the build to some extent, and these are the best things to unlock, to be honest, and most of the time you get ones for heroes that you're never going to play. There's also only a couple of animations for the characters, and the biggest customization option, of course, is the hoverboard, which I just spoke about. There's really nothing to work for within this game, and unless they do season through a battle pass or regular updates, it doesn't look like they will. I just can't see there being any reason to keep going back to this game and grinding it. Match that with the fact that there isn't a competitive mode to the game, and the game only has 2 really boring game modes, which include a capture mode and a really awful collect the power cells game. There is nothing that is really bringing players into the game. To summarize my experience, and I'll try and calm down for this bit, the game, despite everything I've said, isn't bad. Like, it's functional and it has a smooth experience, but it's just not a satisfying game to play. There is nothing about it that would make me want to keep playing this for weeks on end. There is nothing about it that would make me want to drop Overwatch or even Paladins to play this game. The gameplay is so mediocre. The soundtrack adds nothing to the experience. The customization options are extremely bare-boned. Characters aren't unique in the slightest, and the game modes and maps are probably the most boring game modes to add to a hero-based game. That leaves 2 things for me that I actually like, and that was its art style, and actually, yeah, that's it. One thing. There's one thing I like, and that's the art style. I'm not surprised that this game hasn't taken off. There is really nothing appealing about it for me. And while some people do seem to enjoy it as a go-to game to replace Gigantic, I just can't see it. Even Jambu, who was a big fan of Gigantic, said it made him sad that Gigantic wasn't around anymore and has gone back to playing Smite to replace that empty feeling. Bleeding Edge just isn't fun for me, and maybe it's your cup of tea and you will enjoy it, and fair play to you if you do. But with the flaws I have discussed being on such a fundamental level, I just don't see a future for this game. I feel like it was outdated, doesn't have any originality to it, and just feels like a rushed project. I love Ninja Theory as a studio, but this was just not the game I wanted from them, sadly, and from the looks of it, it's not the game their fans wanted either. But let me know what you guys think. Did you enjoy this game? And if so, what did you like about it? Let me know in the comments below. I'll leave my Patreon, Discord and Twitter links in the description below if you want to support me on there. And if you enjoyed this type of content, then please do hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm determined to hit that 500 subs milestone within this month, so yeah, come join the crew. Also, big shout out to the mighty Jambu for helping me out with this review. He actually helped me write this script because sometimes, you know, words are hard. So if you want to watch us stream some games, head over to our Twitch. We try and stream every week, but you know, sometimes life gets in the way. But the more people in the chat, the better. But anyways, that is all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.